I received the call on what should have been the happiest day of my parents' lives. They had been planning their golden anniversary cruise for 3 years, scrimping and saving every dollar, turning down dinners with friends, and skipping family gatherings to put money aside for this one perfect trip. 50 years of marriage deserved something extraordinary, they said. Something they'd remember for the rest of their lives. I just never imagined it would be for the reasons it turned out to be. My name is Zephyrine, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a data analyst for a mid-sized insurance firm in Baltimore, spending my days staring at spreadsheets and probability models. It's boring work, steady work, the kind of career my parents beamed about to anyone who would listen. Their daughter, the professional, their daughter who made it. My younger brother, Kofi, took a different path, bouncing between gig economy jobs and what he called entrepreneurial ventures. My parents loved him just as fiercely, but I could see the worry lines deepen around my mother's eyes every time he mentioned another failed startup or another investment opportunity that required just a little more capital. The morning they left for their cruise, I drove them to the airport. My father, Osiris, wore a new polo shirt he'd bought on clearance, pale yellow with thin blue stripes. My mother, Azariah, had her hair freshly done in elegant silver locks that fell past her shoulders, and she wore a flowing coral dress that made her dark skin glow. They looked like teenagers, giddy and nervous, clutching their matching rolling suitcases covered in tags from places they'd never been but dreamed of visiting. Baby girl, my mother said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of cocoa butter and the perfume she'd been wearing since I was a child. Don't you worry about a thing. We'll be back before you know it, full of stories and pictures. My father hugged me next, his grip still strong, despite his 71 years. Take care of your brother. Make sure he doesn't do anything too foolish while we're gone. I laughed. That's a full-time job, Daddy. Don't I know it? His eyes crinkled at the corners, deep lines carved by decades of laughter and struggle. But he's your brother. He needs you more than he admits. I watched them disappear into the airport, two people who had built a life together from nothing, who had raised two children in a neighborhood where success stories were rare, who had loved each other through poverty and racism and loss and everything else this world had thrown at them. I felt a tightness in my chest, a strange premonition I couldn't name. I shook it off. I was being ridiculous. They were going on a cruise, not to war. The first 3 days passed normally. They texted photos from the ship, pictures of elaborate buffets and sunset views over endless blue water. My mother sent a video of my father attempting to salsa dance during a deck party, his movements stiff but enthusiastic. I sent back laughing emojis and told them to have fun. Kofi barely responded to the family group chat, but that was typical. He was probably busy with whatever new scheme had captured his attention. On the fourth day, the text stopped. I didn't think much of it at first. They were on vacation. Maybe they were enjoying a shore excursion without cell service, or perhaps they'd decided to unplug and actually relax. My mother had mentioned wanting to disconnect from technology, to rediscover what it felt like to just be present with my father without the constant buzz of phones and notifications. But when the fifth day came and went with nothing, unease crept up my spine like cold fingers. I tried calling. Both phones went straight to voicemail. I called again an hour later. Same result. I checked the cruise line's website, looking for emergency contact numbers, wondering if I was overreacting, if this was normal, if I was being the anxious daughter who couldn't let her parents enjoy their anniversary in peace. By the sixth day, I was frantic. I called the cruise line's customer service number and waited on hold for 45 minutes, listening to the same calypso-style music on loop until I wanted to scream. When I finally reached a representative, a woman with a practiced, cheerful voice, I explained the situation. "I'm so sorry to hear you're concerned," she said, her tone suggesting she dealt with worried relatives daily. "Let me pull up the passenger manifest. What are their names?" "Osiris and Azariah Pemberton. They boarded 6 days ago for the 14-day Caribbean adventure package." I heard typing, then a pause that lasted too long. Ma'am, I'm showing the Pembertons checked into their cabin on day 1, but I don't see any activity on their shipboard account since day 3. No charges for excursions, spa services, specialty dining, anything. My heart started pounding. What does that mean? Where are they? I'm not sure, ma'am. Let me transfer you to ship security. Another hold. More music. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. When a man's voice finally came on the line, deeper and more serious, I felt my stomach drop. Ms. Pemberton, this is Chief Security Officer Rodriguez. I need you to stay calm while I ask you some questions. When was the last time you spoke directly to your parents? 3 days ago. They sent photos and texts. Why? What's happened? We've initiated a search of the vessel. Your parents haven't been seen by crew or other passengers for approximately 72 hours. Their cabin shows signs of occupancy, but they haven't attended any meals, activities, or disembarked at any of our port stops. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of my desk, feeling my breath come too fast. What are you saying? Are they hurt? Did they fall overboard? I need to know what's happening. We're doing everything we can to locate them. I need you to think carefully. Did they mention any plans, anyone they were meeting? Anything unusual in their behavior before they left? No, nothing. They were excited. It was their anniversary. They've been planning this for years. My voice broke. Please find them, please. We have the Coast Guard on alert. We're reviewing security footage. I'll call you the moment we have any information. The line went dead. I sat in my cubicle surrounded by the mundane hum of office life, people discussing lunch plans and weekend activities, while my world collapsed into a nightmare I couldn't comprehend. My parents had disappeared, vanished on a cruise ship in the middle of the Caribbean. It made no sense. Nothing made sense. I called Kofi. He didn't answer. I called again and again. Finally, on the 5th attempt, he picked up, his voice groggy. Z, what's wrong? It's the middle of the day. I was sleeping. Mom and Dad are missing. Silence, then, what? I explained everything, my words tumbling over each other. I expected shock, panic, the same terror that was clawing at my chest. Instead, I heard something strange in his voice when he finally spoke. Hesitation, like he was choosing his words too carefully. I'm sure they're fine. Maybe they just wanted some privacy. You know how Mom can be. She probably convinced Dad to do some romantic hideaway thing and forgot to tell anyone. Kofi, the ship security can't find them. The Coast Guard is involved. This isn't a romantic hideaway. Something is wrong. You're overreacting. They'll turn up. His dismissiveness ignited anger through my fear. How can you be so calm? Our parents are missing. I'm not being calm. I'm being rational. There's probably a simple explanation. Call me when you actually know something, okay? I've got to go. He hung up. I stared at my phone, a sick feeling spreading through my gut that had nothing to do with my parents' disappearance and everything to do with my brother's reaction. He wasn't surprised enough. He wasn't worried enough. Something was wrong, something beyond what the cruise line was telling me. And suddenly I knew with absolute certainty that Kofi knew more than he was saying. I left work immediately, telling my supervisor there was a family emergency. I drove to Kofi's apartment in East Baltimore, a third-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. His car was in the lot, an aging sedan with a dented front bumper. I pounded on his door until he answered, standing in the doorway in basketball shorts and a stained t-shirt, annoyance written across his face. What are you doing here? We need to talk. Now. He sighed, but stepped aside. The apartment was cluttered, takeout containers covering the coffee table, clothes piled on the couch. It smelled of stale pizza and something else, something chemical I couldn't identify. I moved a stack of papers off a chair and sat down, fixing him with the look I'd perfected over years of being the responsible older sister. Tell me what you know. I don't know anything. Don't lie to me, Kofi. I heard it in your voice on the phone. You weren't surprised. Why weren't you surprised that Mom and Dad are missing? He rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture so like our father, it made my heart ache. When he finally looked at me, his eyes held something I'd never seen before. Guilt. Deep, soul-crushing guilt. I didn't think it would go this far. What are you talking about? He paced to the window, staring out at the alley behind the building. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I owed some people money, a lot of money, and I couldn't pay it back. Ice flooded my veins. How much? 75,000. I couldn't breathe. $75,000. The number hung in the air between us, impossible and terrifying. For what? How could you possibly owe that much? It doesn't matter. What matters is these aren't the kind of people you can just ignore. They made it clear what would happen if I didn't pay, and I didn't have it. I didn't have anything. So what did you do? I already knew. I could feel the answer coming, could see it in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. I went to Mom and Dad. I told them I was in trouble. I begged them for help. My parents, my gentle, hard-working parents who had saved for 3 years for this cruise. They gave you the money. Not at first. Dad said no. He said I had to learn responsibility, that he'd bailed me out too many times. But I told them what these guys threatened to do to me. I told them I was scared. He finally turned to face me, tears streaming down his face. And Mom convinced Dad. She said they couldn't lose their son, that they could take another cruise someday, but they couldn't get another me. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him until he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. So they gave you their cruise money, all of it. Not all of it. They kept enough for the deposit, for the trip, but yeah, most of it, 60,000 of it. And they still went on the cruise. They insisted. Mom said they'd already put down the deposit and they'd just have to be careful, enjoy the ship, and skip the extras. I thought it would be fine. His voice cracked. I swear I thought it would be fine. But it wasn't fine, because 2 elderly people on a cruise ship, careful with their money, skipping expensive excursions and meals, wouldn't just disappear. Unless something else was happening, unless there was a piece of this story I still didn't understand. Who were these people you owed money to? It doesn't matter now. I paid them. It's done. Kofi, if they did something to Mom and Dad, if they followed them on that ship, they wouldn't. That's not how it works. I paid my debt. There's no reason for them to go after anyone. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. He wasn't sure. He'd made a deal with dangerous people and then sent our elderly parents onto a ship with most of their money gone, vulnerable and exposed, and he wasn't sure what might happen next. I stood, my legs unsteady. I'm calling the FBI, the Coast Guard, everyone, and you're going to tell them exactly who these people are and what you did. Z, wait, if I involve the feds, if I start talking about these guys, I'm dead. You understand that? They'll kill me, and our parents might already be dead because of you. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, collapsing onto his couch, his face in his hands. Part of me felt savage satisfaction at his pain. The larger part felt only terror at what we might have lost. My phone buzzed. The cruise line security chief. I answered with trembling hands. Ms. Pemberton, we've reviewed the security footage. I need you to sit down. I was already sitting, had collapsed back into the chair, my legs unable to hold me. Just tell me, your parents were last seen on the evening of day 3, leaving their cabin at approximately 9 p.m. They took the stairs to the lower decks, toward the crew areas. They appeared to be following someone, though we can't get a clear view of who. They entered a restricted area, and that's where the footage ends. We've searched that section of the ship. They're not there. What does that mean? Where could they go? There's a service entrance that leads to the tender dock. Small boats we use for shore excursions at ports without deep water access. One of the tenders is missing. Someone took them off the ship. That's our working theory. We're coordinating with local authorities at each port we've visited. Ms. Pemberton, I have to ask you again, is there any reason someone would want to take your parents? Any debts? Any enemies? Anything in their past that might explain this? I looked at Kofi, hunched over on his couch, looking like a child afraid of punishment. Yes, I said. There might be. The next hours blurred together in a chaos of phone calls and interviews. The FBI became involved, agents asking questions I didn't have answers to. Kofi finally broke down and gave them names, information about the loan sharks he'd gotten involved with, though he was vague on details, clearly terrified of repercussions. The agents' faces remained professionally neutral, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. Another young man making stupid choices, dragging his family down with him. They traced the missing tender to a small private island off the coast of Dominica, a speck of land owned by a shell corporation with ties to offshore banking and suspected money laundering. The Coast Guard dispatched a cutter. I wanted to be on it, wanted to storm whatever beach or building held my parents. But the agents were firm. Civilians stayed behind. They would handle the extraction. I spent the night in a hotel near the FBI field office, unable to go home, unable to do anything but wait. Kofi sat across from me in the sterile hotel room, neither of us speaking. What was there to say? He'd destroyed our family trying to save himself, and I hadn't noticed, hadn't seen how desperate he'd gotten, hadn't been there to stop him before he dragged our parents into his mess. My phone rang at dawn. I grabbed it so fast I nearly threw it across the room. Ms. Pemberton, this is Agent Caraway. We've located your parents. They're alive. The relief nearly knocked me unconscious. I gasped, tears pouring down my face. Are they hurt? Can I talk to them? They're being examined by medics now. They're frightened and exhausted, but physically unharmed. We're arranging transport back to the States. They should be stateside within 12 hours. What happened to them? Who took them? There was a pause. That's complicated. Your parents have quite a story to tell. I think it's better if they explain it themselves. But Miss Pemberton, you should know that this wasn't what anyone thought. What does that mean? Just be at Johns Hopkins Hospital this afternoon. We'll bring them there for full medical evaluation. You can talk to them then. The line went dead. I sat holding my phone, relief and confusion warring in my chest. They were alive. That was all that mattered. But what did he mean? It wasn't what anyone thought? The 12 hours crawled by. Kofi and I drove to the hospital in silence. He'd barely spoken since the agent called, shock and relief rendering him mute. I couldn't look at him. Every time I did, I felt rage rising in my throat. He'd done this. Whatever had happened, whatever our parents had endured, it was because of him. We waited in a private room, agents posted outside. Finally, the door opened. My mother walked in first, my father right behind her. They looked smaller than I remembered, frailer, my mother's silver locks tangled and windswept, my father's yellow polo shirt stained and wrinkled. But they were alive. They were here. I ran to them, wrapping them both in a hug, sobbing into my mother's shoulder. She held me tight, her own tears wetting my hair. My father's arms came around both of us, and for a long moment we just stood there, a knot of relief and love and trauma. When we finally pulled apart, I saw Kofi standing awkwardly by the door. My mother saw him too. Her face did something complicated, anger and love and disappointment all at once. Mama, he started, but she held up a hand. Not yet. Sit down, both of you. We need to talk. We sat. An agent entered with them, a woman with kind eyes and an official demeanor. She introduced herself as Agent Caraway, the one I'd spoken to on the phone. Your parents have already given their statement, she said, but they wanted to tell you directly what happened. My father cleared his throat. His voice was rough, strained. We need to start at the beginning, the real beginning. Osiris, my mother said softly. No, Azariah. They need to know all of it. He looked at Kofi, his eyes hard. Your brother came to us 3 months ago, desperate for money. He told us about the debt, the threats. And your mother's heart broke for him. She wanted to help. We both did, my mother interjected. He's our son. But we didn't have $75,000. We had our cruise fund, yes, but that was only $20,000 even after 3 years of saving. We couldn't give him what he needed. I felt cold. So what did you do? My mother took over. We have a house. It's old, needs work, but it's paid off. We've owned it for 30 years. It's worth maybe $300,000 in this market. You didn't, I whispered. We took out a reverse mortgage, my father said. Got $75,000 in cash. Gave it all to your brother to pay his debt. I turned to Kofi, horror washing over me. They mortgaged their house, for you. He looked like he might vomit. I didn't know they did that. They just said they found the money. They didn't tell me. We didn't want you to feel guilty, my mother said, though her tone suggested he absolutely should feel guilty. We thought we were helping our son. We thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't, my father continued, because the people Kofi owed money to, they did some checking. They found out about the reverse mortgage. They found out we'd pulled out $75,000. And they decided that if we had that kind of money lying around, we might have more. Agent Caraway stepped in. The organization your brother was involved with specializes in loan sharking, but they've also been linked to kidnapping for ransom and elder fraud. When they discovered your parents had accessed significant equity in their home, they saw an opportunity. My mother's hand shook as she spoke. We were on the ship enjoying our cruise. We'd accepted that we'd spent most of our savings helping Kofi, but we were together celebrating 50 years. That's what mattered. Then on the third night, a crew member came to our cabin, said there was an emergency call for us that Kofi had been in an accident. We followed him, my father said, down to the crew areas to a service dock. There were 3 men waiting. They grabbed us, put us in a boat, and took us to an island. Kept us in a concrete building with no windows. Told us they wanted $200,000 for our release. 200,000. The number hit me like a hammer. But you didn't have that. That's what we told them, my mother said. Over and over, we showed them our bank statements, everything. We'd given Kofi all our available cash. All we had left was Social Security and a small pension. They didn't believe us. They thought you were hiding money, I said. For 3 days, my father said, his voice breaking. They interrogated us, threatened us, said they'd kill us both if we didn't tell them where the money was. We couldn't tell them what we didn't. No, we didn't have it. There was nothing to give. Agent Caraway continued the story. Eventually, they realized your parents were telling the truth, but by then, the Coast Guard was searching for them, and the FBI was involved. The kidnappers panicked. They were planning to kill your parents and dump them at sea to eliminate witnesses. My mother grabbed my hand, squeezing so hard it hurt. We thought we were going to die, baby. We made peace with it. We prayed. We told each other we loved each other one more time. But one of the kidnappers, the youngest one, he couldn't go through with it, my father said. He was maybe 25, not much older than you, Kofi. He told the others he wouldn't be part of murder. They fought. And in the chaos, he helped us escape, hid us in a storage shed until the Coast Guard arrived. I was crying again, unable to stop. The image of my parents, terrified and certain they were about to die, was unbearable. Did they catch the kidnappers? All of them, Agent Caraway confirmed. They're in federal custody. The young man who helped your parents will likely receive a reduced sentence for cooperating. The others are facing life in prison. I looked at Kofi. He sat frozen, his face ashen, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. He looked like he wanted to disappear, to cease existing. Good, I thought viciously. He should feel every ounce of this pain. But my mother, impossibly, stood and walked to him. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I know you didn't mean for this to happen. I know you were scared and desperate, but you need to understand what your choices cost. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never meant. I know, she said softly. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't give us back our home or our safety or those 3 days of terror. You have to live with that. And you have to do better. No more schemes, no more shortcuts. You understand me? He nodded, sobbing like a child. She pulled him into her arms, and my father joined them. I sat apart, watching my parents comfort the son who had nearly gotten them killed, and I didn't know whether to admire their capacity for forgiveness or rage at their inability to hold him accountable. Agent Caraway touched my shoulder. Can I speak with you outside? In the hallway, she handed me a folder. Your parents' financial situation is complicated. The reverse mortgage company has been notified of what happened. Given the circumstances, they're willing to work with your parents on repayment terms. But the reality is your parents used their home equity to pay a criminal organization. That money is gone. The house is now leveraged to the hilt. What are you saying? I'm saying your parents are 71 and 70 years old. They have no savings, a mortgaged house, and no way to pay it back. The monthly payments on that reverse mortgage are going to eat their pension. Within a year, maybe two, they'll lose the house. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. They'd tried to help their son, and it had cost them everything. There has to be something, some kind of victim's compensation, we're looking into it. But these processes take time, and there's no guarantee. I'm telling you this so you can prepare. Your parents are going to need help, significant help. I looked back through the window at my family, still huddled together, my mother stroking Kofi's hair, my father's hand on his shoulder. They'd nearly died. They'd lost their financial security, and they were comforting the person who'd caused it all. Thank you for telling me, I said. Over the next weeks, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The reverse mortgage payments were $3,500 a month, more than half their combined income. They'd fall behind within months. I hired a lawyer who specialized in elder law, hoping to find some way to challenge the mortgage or delay foreclosure, but the options were limited. My parents had signed the papers willingly, even if they'd done it under duress to help their son. Kofi disappeared for a while. I didn't ask where he went. Part of me hoped he'd run far enough that I'd never have to see him again. But he turned up 3 weeks later, thinner and quieter. He'd gotten a job, he said, minimum wage at a warehouse, but steady. He wanted to help repay Mom and Dad. It'll take you 20 years to repay $75,000 at minimum wage, I told him coldly. Then it takes 20 years. I have to do something. I wanted to say it wasn't enough, that nothing he did would ever be enough. But I was tired. Tired of being angry, tired of carrying the weight of our family's disaster. I sat down at my computer and opened a spreadsheet. I was a data analyst. I solved problems with numbers, so I would solve this one. I calculated my parents' income and expenses, the mortgage, payment, the timeline to foreclosure. Then I calculated my own finances, my salary, my savings, my 401k. I could do it. If I cut my expenses to the bone, if I moved into my parents' house to save rent and help with bills, if I took the money I'd been saving for a down payment on my own home and used it to cover mortgage payments, I could keep them afloat. It would cost me everything I'd saved, every plan I'd had for my own future, but I could do it. I called my parents. I'm moving in with you. We're going to figure this out together. My mother cried, Baby, no. You have your own life. We can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you, I'm coming home. My father's voice was thick with emotion. You're a good daughter, Zephyrine, better than we deserve. You deserve everything, I said, and I'm going to make sure you don't lose your home. I moved back into my childhood bedroom 2 weeks later. It felt surreal, sleeping in the room with the same pale pink walls, the same view of the backyard where I'd played as a child, but at night I could hear my parents breathing in the next room, alive and safe, and that made every sacrifice worth it. Kofi started coming around more, bringing groceries, doing repairs around the house, slowly trying to rebuild what he'd destroyed. My parents let him. I was less forgiving, but I saw the change in him, the way he took every shift his warehouse offered, the way he stopped talking about his big ideas and started talking about trade school, about building a skill, about actually working for a future instead of scheming for a shortcut. The kidnapping case went to trial 8 months later. We all testified, reliving those horrible days. The defendants were convicted on all counts, multiple life sentences. The young man who'd helped my parents got 15 years, a harsh sentence, but better than life. He caught my eye as they led him out of the courtroom and mouthed, I'm sorry. I nodded. He'd saved my parents' lives. That counted for something. The trial brought media attention. A local news station ran our story, painting my parents as victims and highlighting their financial struggles. To my shock, a GoFundMe appeared, started by someone we didn't even know. It raised $17,000 in 3 weeks. People we'd never met, moved by my parents' ordeal, sent money to help. It wasn't enough to solve everything, but it bought time, breathing room. My father cried when I showed him the donations. Strangers helping us, I can't believe it. People are good, Osiris, my mother said. We just forget sometimes because the bad is so loud. A year after the kidnapping, we gathered for my parents' anniversary. The actual anniversary this time, not the one they'd tried to celebrate on that doomed cruise. We couldn't afford a big celebration, just dinner at home, the four of us around the same table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals. My mother raised her glass of grocery store wine to 51 years, and to the family that didn't let us fall. We clinked glasses, even Kofi, who'd been subdued all evening. He cleared his throat, looking nervous. I've been accepted to an electrician training program. It's a 2-year apprenticeship. I start next month. And I've been talking to a financial counselor about proper budgeting and debt management. I'm going to do this right, finally. My father clapped him on the shoulder. Good man, that's what I want to hear. I said nothing, but I felt a small thaw in the ice around my heart. Maybe he meant it this time. Maybe he'd finally learned. Only time would tell. Later, helping my mother wash dishes, she spoke quietly. I know you're still angry at him. I know you think we shouldn't forgive him so easily. He almost got you killed, Mama. He cost you your savings and your security. How can you just let that go? She was quiet for a moment, her hands in the soapy water. I'm not letting it go. I'll carry what happened for the rest of my life. But he's my son, and hating him won't give me back what I lost. It'll just take more from me. I hugged her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. You're better than me. No, baby, I'm just older. I've learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. He has to live with what he did. That's punishment enough. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I pulled out my laptop and looked at my spreadsheet. The one tracking my parents' finances, my contributions, the GoFundMe money, Kofi's small payments from his warehouse job. We were making it, barely. They'd keep the house. They'd have stability. It was enough. My own dreams, the down payment I'd saved, the plan to buy my own place, maybe start my own consulting firm, those were gone. I'd sacrificed them on the altar of my brother's mistakes and my parents' survival. Some days I resented it bitterly. Other days I felt only gratitude that I'd been in a position to help, that I hadn't lost them to the ocean or to a criminal's bullet. I thought about the young man who'd helped them escape, sitting in federal prison for 15 years. He'd thrown away his freedom to save 2 elderly strangers. I thought about my parents, who'd mortgaged their house to save their son, never imagining it would lead to their own kidnapping. I thought about Kofi, finally facing consequences and trying, however imperfectly, to make amends. None of us were heroes. None of us were villains. We were just people stumbling through life, making choices good and bad, trying to protect the people we loved, and sometimes destroying them in the process. I closed my laptop and turned off the light. Tomorrow I'd wake up and go to my job that paid the bills but didn't fulfill me. I'd come home to my parents' house, make dinner, review the budget, look for ways to stretch every dollar. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but my parents were alive. They were here. I could hear my father's soft snoring through the wall, my mother's lighter breathing. That sound, the sound of them living, was worth every sacrifice. The golden anniversary cruise they'd planned for had ended in nightmare, but they'd survived. We'd all survived. And somehow, improbably, we were building something from the wreckage, not what we'd had before. Something different, scarred and complicated and hard-won, a family that had been broken and put back together, not quite fitting right anymore, but holding nonetheless. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, knowing that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more bills, more complicated feelings about my brother and my choices and what I'd given up. But tonight, in this moment, there was peace. My parents were safe in their home. My brother was trying to change, and I was doing what I'd always done, what my parents had taught me by example. I was taking care of my family, no matter the cost. The next morning started with familiar sounds. My mother moving around the kitchen, the smell of coffee brewing, my father's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Normal sounds, precious sounds, sounds I'd feared I'd never hear again. I dressed for work in the same business casual clothes I wore every day, the uniform of someone whose life was spreadsheets and fluorescent lights and endless meetings about statistical models. At breakfast, my father was reading the newspaper, an actual physical newspaper he still insisted on subscribing to despite the cost. My mother set a plate of eggs and toast in front of me, made exactly how I liked them, just as she had every morning of my childhood. Kofi wasn't there. He worked early shifts now, leaving the house before dawn. He's really sticking with it, my mother said, following my gaze to his empty chair. 2 months now, hasn't missed a single day. 2 months isn't 20 years, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. My father lowered his newspaper. Zephyrine, I know, it's hard, but your brother is trying. That has to count for something. Does it? Does trying erase what happened? Does it give you back your cruise, your savings, your security? No, my mother said quietly. But neither does punishing him forever. At some point, we have to decide whether we're going to let this destroy our whole family or whether we're going to heal. I ate my eggs in silence. They were right. I knew they were right. But the anger was still there, a hot coal in my chest that wouldn't cool. I'd given up everything to fix his mess, my savings, my independence, my future plans. And they wanted me to just forgive and move on. At work, I buried myself in data analysis, finding comfort in numbers that behaved predictably, following logical rules, unlike people who made irrational, destructive choices. My coworker, Tamika, stopped by my cubicle around mid-morning with coffee. You look like you need this, she said, setting a cup down. Everything okay? Tamika was one of the few people at work who knew the full story. I'd had to explain my sudden move, my new financial constraints, why I'd stopped going to happy hours and team lunches. She'd been understanding, but I could see the pity in her eyes. It made me want to scream. Just family stuff, I said. Same as always. Your brother still living up to his promises? So far, but it's only been 2 months. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. She perched on the edge of my desk. You know, you can't live your whole life waiting for disaster. Sometimes people actually do change, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just get better at hiding their mistakes until they explode. She was quiet for a moment. What about you? When do you get to live your life instead of managing everyone else's? The question hit harder than she probably intended. When did I get to live my life? I was 32, living in my childhood bedroom, every dollar earmarked for keeping my parents afloat. My life was on hold indefinitely, and I was supposed to smile and be grateful I still had parents to sacrifice for. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe never. That's not fair to you. Fair doesn't really factor into it anymore. Back at home that evening, I found Kofi in the living room with my father. They were looking at papers spread across the coffee table, what looked like course materials and apprenticeship contracts. My father was explaining something about electrical codes, and Kofi was taking notes, actually paying attention for once in his life. They looked up when I came in. Hey, Z, Kofi said. I was just showing Dad the program requirements. It's actually pretty intensive, but the placement rate is 92%, and starting salary for journeyman electricians in the city is around 55,000. I set my bag down. That's good. Once I'm certified, once I'm making decent money, I'm going to pay you back, you and Mom and Dad, every dollar you've spent fixing my mistakes. At 55,000 a year, after taxes and living expenses, that'll take you about a decade, I said. Longer if you factor in inflation. His face fell. My father shot me a look. Zephyrine. What? I'm just being realistic. He should know what he's committing to. I know, Kofi said quietly. I know it'll take forever, but I'm going to do it anyway. I have to. I can't live with myself otherwise. Part of me wanted to say he should have thought about that before he gambled money he didn't have, before he went to loan sharks, before he put our parents in danger. But he looked so earnest, so genuinely remorseful, that I couldn't muster the cruelty. Then I hope you mean it this time, I said instead, and went upstairs before anyone could respond. In my room, I opened my laptop and checked the budget spreadsheet. We'd had an unexpected expense this month. My father's medication had gone up in price, and it threw off all my careful calculations. I'd need to pull from my emergency fund again, the emergency fund that got smaller every month, that would eventually run dry and leave us with nothing to fall back on. I calculated and recalculated, moving numbers around, looking for money that didn't exist, Maybe I could pick up freelance work in the evenings. Maybe I could sell some of my furniture in storage. Maybe I could find a way to make enough money to dig us out of this hole without sacrificing every waking hour to work. Or maybe this was just my life now, the responsible one, the one who cleaned up everyone else's disasters while her own dreams gathered dust. A knock on my door. My mother came in without waiting for an answer, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She handed me one and sat on the edge of my bed. "You're thinking too loud," she said. "I can hear it from downstairs. The medication increase threw off the budget. We'll manage, we always do. Because I'm managing it, Mama. Because I gave up everything to make sure you manage it." She sipped her tea, studying me. "You're angry." Of course I'm angry. I'm 32 years old, living in my childhood bedroom, spending all my money on bills that shouldn't exist, watching my brother pretend to be reformed while I give up my entire future. Why wouldn't I be angry? You're angry at the wrong person. How is Kofi the wrong person? He caused all of this. He caused the debt. He made terrible choices. But he didn't force you to move home. He didn't force you to sacrifice your savings. You chose that. I stared at her. What was I supposed to do? Let you lose your house? Let you end up homeless at 70 years old? We would have figured something out. We always have. But you saw us in danger and you stepped in because that's who you are. You're the protector. You've been the protector since you were a little girl, always taking care of Kofi, always making sure everyone was okay. But baby, at some point you have to let people figure out their own problems, even if they fail, even if they fall. I can't just watch you fall. I know. And I love you for that. But the anger you're carrying, it's not really about Kofi. It's about the choice you made and the price it cost. You chose us over yourself, and now you're resenting that choice. But you can't resent us for something you decided on your own. The truth of it hit me like cold water. She was right. Kofi had created the crisis, but I'd chosen to solve it this way. I could have said no. I could have let them face the consequences, find their own solutions. But I couldn't stand the thought of them suffering when I had the means to help. I don't know how to stop being angry, I admitted. You don't have to stop, you just have to not let it poison you. And you have to decide whether the sacrifice was worth it. If you look at us, alive and here and together, was it worth what you gave up? I looked at her, my mother, who'd spent 3 days believing she was going to die, who'd lost all her savings and her sense of security, but still found ways to smile, to make breakfast, to comfort the son who'd caused it all. She was stronger than me. Maybe she'd always been stronger. I don't know, I said honestly. Some days, yes, some days I think about what I lost and I want to scream. That's fair, that's human. She stood, kissed my forehead like I was still a child. Just remember, baby, the only person who can give you your life back is you. Not Kofi making amends, not us being grateful. You. You get to decide when you've sacrificed enough. She left me alone with my tea and my thoughts, and my spreadsheet full of numbers that never quite added up to enough. The weeks blurred into months. Summer came, hot and humid, the kind of Baltimore heat that made everything feel sluggish and heavy. Kofi finished his first phase of training and started his apprenticeship, actually bringing home paychecks that he handed over without complaint, contributions to the household that barely made a dent but still meant something. My father's health wavered, a scare with his heart that required a hospital stay and more medications we couldn't afford. I maxed out a credit card to cover the co-pays, adding debt to the pile. My mother took a part-time job at a local library checking out books and shelving returns, bringing in a few hundred extra dollars a month and coming home with stories about patrons and programs. She seemed lighter somehow, despite everything, like having purpose beyond the house gave her life new dimension. And me? I worked. I came home. I managed budgets and paid bills and made sure everyone had what they needed. I was efficient. I was capable. I was slowly disappearing into the role of family savior, losing myself one sacrifice at a time. Tamika staged an intervention at work. She appeared at my desk one afternoon with determination in her eyes. "We're going out tonight, don't argue." I can't. I need to. You need to remember you're a person with a life. We're going to dinner, my treat. You're going to eat. Food you didn't cook and have a conversation that isn't about bills or family drama. Non negotiable. I almost said no, but something in her expression, a mixture of concern and frustration, made me pause. When was the last time I'd done something just for myself? I couldn't remember. Okay, I said, but somewhere cheap. Somewhere medium. I'm not taking you to a food truck for your one night of freedom. We went to an Ethiopian restaurant, sitting on low stools around a shared platter, tearing off pieces of injera to scoop up spicy lentils and savory meats. The flavors exploded on my tongue, complex and rich, reminding me that the world contained experiences beyond my small loop of home and work and worry. When's the last time you went on a date? Tamika asked halfway through the meal. Before I moved home, maybe 8 months ago. Girl, 8 months. You're 32, not 82. You've put your whole life on pause. My parents almost died. They lost everything. I can't just go out and date while they're struggling. Why not? You being miserable doesn't make them less struggling. You being alone and isolated just means everyone suffers. I picked at the food on the platter. I don't have energy for dating, for pretending to be interested in some guy's job or hobbies when my brain is running calculations about whether we can afford to fix the water heater if it breaks. That's exactly my point. You've lost yourself completely. You're not Zephyrine anymore. You're just the Pemberton family crisis manager, and that's not sustainable. What choice do I have? You always have choices. You just don't let yourself see them because you've decided martyrdom is your role. Her words stung because they echoed what my mother had said. Everyone seemed to think I was choosing this, but what they didn't understand was that the alternative was unthinkable. Let my parents lose their home? Stand by while they struggled? I couldn't. It wasn't in me. But driving home that night, full of good food and Tamika's challenging questions, I let myself wonder for the first time what would happen if I did step back? Not abandon them, but loosen my grip on managing every detail of their survival. Would everything fall apart? Or would they find a way, as they'd found ways to survive for 70 years before I was born? The house was dark when I arrived, everyone asleep. I sat in my car in the driveway looking at the home I'd grown up in, the home I'd sacrificed everything to save. It needed a new roof. The siding was starting to rot in places. The porch steps were warped. Even if we kept making payments, the maintenance costs would eventually bury us. I was plugging holes in a sinking ship, and I was going down with it. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, Zephyrine, this is Devin. We met at the conference last year. Tamika gave me your number, said you might want to grab coffee sometime. I stared at the message, a man I vaguely remembered from a work conference, someone who'd seemed interested, someone I'd written off because I had too much on my plate. Tamika, meddling but well-intentioned, trying to remind me I was still young, still allowed to have a life. I should delete it. I should focus on what mattered, on keeping my family afloat. But my thumb hovered over the keyboard, and before I could overthink it, I typed back. I remember, coffee sounds nice. It was a small thing. Probably nothing would come of it. But it felt like rebellion, like reclaiming a tiny piece of myself from the all-consuming responsibility that had swallowed me whole. I sent the message and immediately felt guilty, like I was betraying my parents by daring to think about my own happiness. Inside, I found a note on the kitchen table in my mother's handwriting. Honey, Kofi's first paycheck from his apprenticeship. He wanted you to have it all for the household fund. He's really trying. Love you, Mom. Attached was a check for $600. Not much, but more than he'd ever contributed before. I held it, feeling the weight of my brother's attempt at redemption, at repaying the unpayable debt. $600. It would cover the increased medication costs with a little left over. It was something. I added it to the budget spreadsheet, watching the numbers shift slightly in our favor. Not enough to change our trajectory, but enough to breathe for another month. Maybe that was all anyone could do. Breathe for another month, and another, until enough months passed that it became a life. I thought about the coffee date with Devin, about Tamika's insistence that I reclaim my life, about my mother's wisdom that I couldn't give from an empty cup. Maybe they were right. Maybe I needed to stop drowning with the ship and start building a lifeboat, something that could hold me while I helped hold everyone else. Or maybe I was just tired and none of this philosophizing meant anything except that I was lonely and scared and so tired of being strong. I went to bed with my phone on my nightstand, Devin's text still visible on the screen. Tomorrow I'd respond. Tomorrow I'd try to remember how to be a person instead of just a solution. Tomorrow I'd figure out whether it was possible to save my family and myself at the same time, or if the universe demanded I choose. Tonight I just slept, dreamless and exhausted, another day survived in a life I hadn't planned but had somehow become inescapably mine. Coffee with Devin happened on a Saturday afternoon at a place near the harbor, tourist heavy but with good views of the water. I almost canceled 3 times, finding excuses about things I needed to do at home, bills to review, groceries to buy. But Tamika had threatened to drag me there physically if I backed out, so I went, wearing clothes that weren't my work uniform and makeup I'd almost forgotten how to apply. Devin was already there when I arrived, sitting at an outdoor table, looking comfortable in a way I envied. He stood when he saw me, smiling broadly, and I remembered why I'd noticed him at that conference. Warm eyes, easy manner, the kind of person who seemed genuinely interested in others. Zephyrine, thanks for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. Tamika warned me you might bolt. Tamika talks too much, I said, but I smiled. Sorry, I'm a little out of practice with this, the whole normal human interaction thing. Same, I've been buried in work for months, but Tamika made a compelling case that I should take a chance on the mysterious data analyst who apparently needs to remember she's allowed to have fun. We ordered coffee and fell into surprisingly easy conversation. He worked in urban planning, dealing with infrastructure and development projects. We compared notes on bureaucracy and the strange satisfaction of making spreadsheets do exactly what you wanted. It felt normal, blessedly, wonderfully normal. For an hour, I wasn't the family crisis manager. I was just a woman having coffee with an interesting man. But then he asked about my living situation, a casual question, and I had to decide how much truth to tell. I could lie, pretend I lived alone, maintain the fiction of a normal life, or I could be honest and probably watch him politely exit the conversation. I live with my parents, I said. It's temporary. There were some family issues, financial stuff, and I'm helping them out. That's good of you. Not many people would make that kind of sacrifice. Sometimes I wonder if it's good or just stupid, putting my whole life on hold to fix problems I didn't create. He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. My brother is an addict, has been for 10 years. I've bailed him out more times than I can count. Rehab, rent, legal fees. My parents kept enabling him, and I kept enabling them, enabling him. Finally, my therapist asked me who I was really helping, him or just my own need to feel like a good person. What did you say? I said both and neither. I was helping my guilt. I was helping my fear of what would happen if I stopped. But I wasn't actually helping him. He only got sober when we all stopped saving him and he hit rock bottom. How long has he been clean? 18 months, best 18 months of our family's life. But it only happened when I stepped back and let him face his own consequences. The parallel was obvious, but I bristled anyway. My brother isn't an addict. He made stupid financial decisions and my parents paid the price. Someone had to help them. Did they ask for your help? The question stopped me. I thought back to that moment when I'd learned about the mortgage, the kidnapping, the financial devastation. Had they asked me to move home? Had they requested my savings, my sacrifice? No. I'd announced I was doing it and refused to hear arguments. They would have said no if I'd asked, I said. But that doesn't mean they didn't need it. Maybe, or maybe they would have found another way. Downsized, sold the house, started over. It would have been hard, but people survive hard things. He held up his hands. I'm not saying you made the wrong choice. I don't know your situation. I'm just saying I recognize the pattern because I lived it, and I know what it costs. I wanted to be angry, to defend my choices, but his words had cracked something open. What if I wasn't helping? What if I was just delaying an inevitable reckoning, burning my own life to buy a few more years in a house that was falling apart anyway? We talked for another hour about safer topics, work and hobbies, and favorite books. He walked me to my car, and at the door, he said, "I'd like to see you again, if you're interested." "I am," I said, surprising myself. "But I need to be honest. My life is really complicated right now. I'm not sure I have room for anything else." "Then maybe we take it slow. Just coffee when you have time. No pressure." It felt like a gift, that easy understanding. I nodded, and he smiled, and I drove home, feeling lighter than I had in months. But the lightness evaporated the moment I walked into the house. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table with Kofi, and all three faces turned to me with expressions I couldn't read. Dread settled in my stomach. "What happened?" "Sit down, baby," my mother said. I sat. Kofi looked like he might cry, which sent my pulse racing. "Just tell me." "The reverse mortgage company called," my father said. "They're reviewing the terms because of the kidnapping, the criminal case. There's something about fraudulent purpose clauses, how if the money was used in connection with criminal activity, they can call the full loan." "They're calling the loan?" "Not yet, they're investigating. But if they determine the mortgage was part of criminal enterprise, they can demand full repayment within 30 days." The room spun. Full repayment meant $75,000 immediately. Money we didn't have, couldn't possibly get. If they called the loan, the house was gone. Everything I'd sacrificed, every dollar I'd spent, all of it meaningless. We'd still lose everything, just delayed it by a year. "Can they do that? Is it even legal?" "Their lawyer thinks so," my mother said quietly. "We've been in contact with Agent Caraway. She's looking into it, trying to argue that we were victims, not participants. But the law is complicated." I looked at Kofi. He had his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I keep destroying everything." Part of me wanted to comfort him. Part of me wanted to scream. I did neither. I just sat there, numb, watching everything I'd built to save us crumble in real time. "How long do we have?" I asked. "The investigation could take months," my father said. "Or they could make a determination in weeks. There's no timeline." So we were in limbo, indefinite, waiting to see if the fragile stability I'd created would survive or if it had been doomed from the start. I'd given up everything for nothing. All my plans, my savings, my future, sacrificed to buy time in a house we were going to lose anyway. I stood abruptly. "I need some air." Outside, I walked without direction, just moving, trying to outpace the panic clawing at my chest. My phone rang. Devin. I almost didn't answer, but I couldn't stand to be alone in my head anymore. "Hey," I said, my voice shaky. "Hey, I know we just said goodbye, but I had a good time and wanted to tell you again. Zephyrine, are you okay?" I laughed, a broken sound. "Not really. I just found out the house I've spent the last year killing myself to save might get foreclosed anyway, so that's fun." "Where are you? Do you want company?" "I'm walking. I don't even know where. And no, you don't want to be around me right now. I'm not good company. Text me your location. I'm coming anyway. You don't have to talk, but you shouldn't be alone." He hung up before I could argue. I sent him my location, dropping a pin in the mapping app, and kept walking until I found a bench by the harbor. The water was choppy, gray-green under cloudy skies. I sat and watched boats and tourists and life continuing on, indifferent to my small personal catastrophe. Devin found me 20 minutes later, carrying 2 cups from a nearby coffee shop. He handed me one and sat beside me without speaking. We stayed like that for a while, just existing in parallel, until I finally found words. I gave up everything to save them, my apartment, my savings, my plans. I convinced myself I was being noble, doing the right thing. But what if I was just being a martyr? What if I threw my life away for nothing? "You did it because you love them. That's not nothing." "But if it doesn't work, if they lose the house anyway, what was the point? I could have let it happen a year ago and kept my own life intact. Instead, I dragged myself down with them, and we're all going to drown together." He sipped his coffee. "My therapist used to say you can't fix people. You can only offer support and hope they find their way. But you can't live someone else's life for them, and you can't sacrifice yourself trying. It doesn't help them, and it destroys you. When did you stop? Trying to save your brother. When I realized I was using his addiction as an excuse to avoid my own life, as long as I was focused on his crisis, I didn't have to deal with my failing marriage or my dead end job or anything else I was unhappy about. Fixing him was easier than fixing me. The words hit home. Was that what I'd been doing? Using my family's crisis as an excuse to avoid building my own life? It was easier to be the hero, the savior, than to face the risk of pursuing my own dreams and potentially failing. As long as I was needed here, I had a purpose, a reason to not take chances. I don't know how to stop, I admitted. Even if they lose the house, even if all this was for nothing, I can't just walk away. You don't have to walk away, you just have to walk forward in your own direction, with your own life. You can love them and help them without drowning with them. We sat until the sun started setting, painting the harbor water orange and gold. He didn't offer solutions or try to fix anything. He just stayed, a quiet presence, reminding me that I was a person beyond my family's problems, that I had value beyond my utility. When I finally went home, the house was quiet. Everyone had gone to their rooms, avoiding each other, marinating in private stress. I found my mother in the kitchen making tea with shaking hands. Mama. She turned, and I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear I'd seen after the kidnapping, the fear of losing everything, of having no safety net, of being old and vulnerable in a world that didn't value people like her. I hugged her tight, feeling her fragile bones, her exhaustion. Whatever happens with the house, we'll figure it out, all of us together. I'm so tired, baby. I'm so tired of fighting. I just want peace. I know. Maybe we should just let it go. Sell it before they take it. Get something out of it at least. Start over somewhere smaller. The words I'd been afraid to think, spoken aloud by the person with the most to lose. Maybe that was the answer. Stop fighting to preserve something that was already lost. Accept reality and build something new from what remained. Is that what you want? I asked. I don't know what I want anymore. I'm too tired to know. We drank tea together, in silence, two women holding each other up, trying to figure out how to survive one more day in lives that had become almost unrecognizable. Later in my room, I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done in a year. I updated my resume. I looked at job postings in other cities, places where housing was cheaper, where starting over might actually be possible. Places far from here, from family obligation, from being the only thing holding everyone together. I didn't apply for anything, but I looked. I let myself imagine a different life, and that small act of imagination felt like the first breath of air after almost drowning. 3 weeks later, the reverse mortgage company made their determination. They would not be calling the loan. The investigation concluded that my parents were victims, not participants in criminal enterprise, and the terms would remain as originally agreed. We weren't being foreclosed on immediately. We bought more time, indefinite time, as long as we kept making payments. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt strangely empty. We'd won this battle, but the war continued. Monthly payments we could barely afford. A house slowly decaying. My life still on hold, still sacrificed, still disappearing into the endless need of family crisis. This is good news, my father said, when I didn't react with appropriate celebration. We keep the house. You saved us, Zephyrine. You saved us again. But I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like someone who'd traded herself for a few more years of treading water. The house was saved, but I was still drowning. That night I called Devin. We'd been seeing each other regularly, careful dates that never went too far because I was always aware of the ticking clock, the responsibilities waiting at home, the life I couldn't quite let myself have. The mortgage company decided not to call the loan, I told him. That's great news. Is it? Because it feels like I just got a life sentence instead of execution. Same result, longer suffering. He was quiet, then, what do you want, Zephyrine? Not what your parents need, not what your brother owes, not what you think you should do. What do you actually want? No one had asked me that in so long I'd forgotten how to answer. What did I want? The question felt almost radical, offensive in its self-centeredness. I was supposed to want to help my family to keep them safe, to fulfill my duty as a good daughter. But in the deepest, most secret part of myself, what I wanted was to leave, to pack a bag and drive away and start over somewhere. No one needed me to fix their disasters, to be selfish and free and responsible only for myself. The wanting felt like betrayal, like moral failure, like proof I was exactly as bad as I feared. I want to not be here, I whispered. I want my own life back, but I can't have it without destroying them. So what I want doesn't matter. It matters. It always matters. And you're not destroying them by living your own life. You're giving them the chance to live theirs, to figure out their own solutions instead of depending on yours. But they'll fail, they'll lose everything. Maybe, or maybe they'll surprise you, but you can't sacrifice yourself forever on the maybe. At some point, you have to choose yourself. After we hung up, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, his words echoing. Choose yourself. What a concept. What a terrifying, tempting, impossible concept. But as I drifted toward sleep, I let myself imagine it. A different city, a new job, an apartment of my own with furniture I picked out, and bills I could afford, and silence that was peaceful instead of heavy with obligation. A life measured in my own choices instead of everyone else's needs. It felt like fantasy, but for the first time, it also felt possible. The thing about turning points is you rarely recognize them in the moment. It's only later, looking back, that you can identify the exact instant everything changed. For me, that instant came on an ordinary Tuesday, 3 months after the mortgage company's decision, when I opened my email to find a job offer from a consulting firm in Boston. I'd applied on a whim, updating my resume late one night when I couldn't sleep, sending applications to positions I was overqualified for in cities I'd never been to. I didn't think anything would come of it. The resume was a security blanket, proof that I had options even if I never took them. But they'd called, interviewed me virtually, liked me enough to make an offer. 75,000 a year, full benefits, relocation assistance, a salary that would be mine, not split among family obligations, a life that would be mine. I stared at the email for an hour, unable to move. The offer letter spelled out everything: start date 2 months away, time to relocate and settle in. All I had to do was click accept, change my life with a single click. But accepting meant telling my family I was leaving. It meant watching my mother's face when I explained I wouldn't be there anymore. It meant my father figuring out the budget without my income supplementing theirs. It meant Kofi carrying more responsibility while still working toward his own redemption. It meant choosing myself, fully and completely, for the first time in my adult life. The terror of that choice was overwhelming. What if they couldn't manage without me? What if my leaving was the thing that finally broke them? What if I was abandoning ship right before it went under? But another voice, quieter, asked different questions. What if they could manage? What if my leaving forced them to find solutions they'd never needed to find while I solved everything? What if staying was actually hurting all of us, keeping us frozen in roles we'd outgrown? I called Devin. I got a job offer, Boston. Good money, good company, everything I should want. That's amazing. Congratulations. I can't take it. Why not? You know why. My family needs me here. Do they? Or have you convinced yourself they do because it's easier than taking the risk? That's not fair, isn't it? Zephyrine, I've watched you for 3 months. You're brilliant and capable and completely convinced your value comes from how much you sacrifice for others, but you're miserable. Anyone can see it, and your family has to see it too. So what, I just abandon them? Pack up and leave while they're still struggling? You set boundaries. You help from a distance if you want to help, but you stop living their lives for them. They're adults. They survived 70 years before you moved home. They can survive now. I wanted to argue, to explain why he was wrong, why my situation was different, but the words wouldn't come, because he wasn't wrong. I'd wrapped my identity so tightly around being the family savior that I'd forgotten who I was underneath. I'm scared, I admitted. What if I regret it? What if something happens and I'm not there? What if something doesn't happen and you've wasted your life waiting for disaster? You can't live in fear of hypotheticals. At some point, you have to choose the life you want and trust that everyone else will figure out theirs. That night at dinner, I made an announcement. I need to tell you all something. They looked up from their plates, my mother's fork halfway to her mouth, my father setting down his water glass, Kofi pausing mid-chew. I saw the fear flash across their faces, the assumption that I was bringing more bad news, another crisis to manage. I got a job offer in Boston. It's a really good position, good money, and I'm thinking about taking it. Silence. My mother set down her fork carefully, too carefully. My father's face was unreadable. Kofi looked at his plate. When would you leave? My mother finally asked, her voice small. 2 months, if I accept. Do you want to accept? My father asked. That question again. What did I want? I'd been avoiding it for so long, but here in front of my family, I had to answer honestly. Yes, I do, but I'm afraid of what happens to you if I go. My father nodded slowly. We'll lose the house. You know that, right? Without your income, we can't make the payments we'll have. Maybe 6 months before we're foreclosed on. I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But I can't keep doing this. I'm not living. I'm just existing, just managing crisis after crisis while my own life disappears. I have to choose myself this time, even though it feels selfish, even though I know what it costs. My mother was crying silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. I braced for guilt, for accusations, for the weight of her disappointment. But when she spoke, her words shocked me. You should go. Mama, no, listen to me. You should go. We never should have let you sacrifice so much. We were grateful and scared, and we let you put your whole life on hold to save ours. That wasn't fair to you. That wasn't right. My father reached across the table, taking my hand. His grip was still strong, still my father's grip. Your mother's right. We're old, baby girl. We've lived our lives. You're 32. You deserve to live yours. But the house, your home, it's just a house, my mother said. We can downsize, find something smaller, cheaper. It'll be fine, we'll be fine. We survived worse than this. I survived 3 days thinking I was going to die, she continued. I survived being kidnapped, threatened, terrified. I can survive moving to a smaller place. But I can't survive watching my daughter throw away her future because she thinks she owes us something. You don't owe us your life, Zephyrine. You never did. I was crying now, too, big, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. Kofi got up and put his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Go, Z, he said quietly. I'll help them. It's my turn to step up, my turn to fix my own mess instead of watching you fix it for me. You can barely take care of yourself. I know, but maybe that's because I've never had to. You were always there, always managing everything. Maybe I need you to leave so I can finally grow up. We stayed like that for a long time, the four of us crying, and holding each other in our falling apart kitchen, in our house that wouldn't be ours much longer, in the life that was ending so a new one could begin. When I finally pulled away, my father squeezed my hand one more time. Take the job, Zephyrine. Build your life. Be happy. Let us figure out how to be okay on our own. What if you can't? Then we can't. But that's not your responsibility. It never was. We put that on you because you were willing to carry it, but you were never meant to bear that weight alone. I went to my room and opened the job offer email. The cursor blinked in the acceptance box, waiting. I thought about everything I'd be leaving behind, the house I'd fought to save, the family I'd tried to hold together, the role I'd played for so long, I'd forgotten it was just a role, not my identity. And I thought about Boston, a city I'd never lived in, a job that would challenge me, an apartment I'd furnish myself, a life I'd build from scratch. The possibility was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I clicked accept. The response was instantaneous. Thank you for accepting our offer. Welcome to the team. We're excited to have you join us. Such simple words for such a monumental change I'd just chosen myself. For the first time in my adult life, I'd chosen myself. I should have felt guilty, part of me did, but mostly I felt light, like I had been carrying a boulder uphill for years and had finally been given permission to set it down. My shoulders didn't know what to do without the weight. I texted Devin. I took the job. His response came immediately. Proud of you. That took real courage. Or selfishness. Same thing sometimes. How do you feel? I thought about it, really examined the swirl of emotions in my chest. Free, terrified, guilty, excited, all of it at once. That sounds about right. Want to celebrate dinner this weekend? Yes, definitely yes. The 2 months before my departure passed in a blur of preparation and emotions. My parents began the process of selling the house, listing it with a realtor who gently suggested updates they couldn't afford. They'd take what they could get and find an apartment, downsizing their lives to fit a smaller space. My father seemed almost relieved, like the burden of maintaining the house had been heavier than he'd admitted. Kofi surprised me. He actually stepped up, taking on more hours at his apprenticeship, researching affordable apartments for our parents, making calls to utility companies and insurance providers. He still had a long way to go, but he was trying, really trying. I've been a child my whole life, he told me one night while we packed up the attic, letting other people clean up my messes, especially you. But I'm 30 years old. It's pathetic. You're figuring it out. That's what matters. I wasted so much time, and I hurt so many people. I don't know how to make it right. You can't make it right. You can only do better going forward. That's all anyone can do. He nodded, quiet for a moment. Are you scared? About Boston? Terrified. I don't know anyone there. I've never lived anywhere but here. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you figure it out. Just like we're going to figure out how to live without you fixing everything. He smiled slightly. You taught us that. By leaving, you taught us we have to figure out our own lives. The week before I left, my parents found an apartment, 2 bedrooms in a senior community with subsidized rent, modest but clean, with accessibility features for aging bodies. The monthly cost was less than half the reverse mortgage payment. They'd have breathing room, space to actually live instead of just survive. It's not our house, my mother said when she showed me pictures, but it's enough. And that's okay. Enough is okay. Moving day was harder than I'd expected. Watching decades of accumulated life get sorted into boxes marked keep, sell, donate felt like witnessing an amputation, necessary but painful. My mother cried over old photo albums. My father stood in the empty living room, staring at the walls he'd painted 5 times over the years, saying goodbye to a structure that had held their entire adult lives. Kofi and I loaded their essentials into a rental truck. The furniture that wouldn't fit in the apartment was being sold. 50 years of marriage reduced to what could fit in 900 square feet. It felt cruel. We don't need much, my father said, reading my expression. We have each other. We have our memories. The rest is just stuff. I feel like I'm taking your home away. No, baby, you're giving us a chance to start over, to live within our means and stop drowning in payments we can't afford. This is a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one yet. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe they'd be okay, that my leaving was helping rather than hurting. But the guilt sat heavy in my chest, a stone I'd carried to Boston with me. My last night in the house, I walked through the empty rooms, remembering the kitchen where my mother taught me to cook, the living room where we'd watched movies on Friday nights, my bedroom where I'd dreamed of who I'd become, never imagining it would take me 32 years and a family crisis to actually start becoming her. I found my father in the backyard, standing in the dark, looking at the sky. I joined him, and we stood in silence for a while. You know what I regret most? He finally said. Not the debt, not the kidnapping, not losing the house. I regret that we taught you kids that struggle was noble, that suffering for family was the highest calling. Your mother and I, we worked so hard, sacrificed so much to give you opportunities we never had. But somewhere along the way, We made you think your value came from how much you could sacrifice. And that wasn't fair. You didn't make me think that, I chose it. We modeled it every time we went without so you kids could have. Every time we praised hard work and service over happiness or fulfillment. We created martyrs instead of whole people. I don't regret helping you. I know, but I regret needing it. I regret that your brother's mistakes became your burden. I regret that you're leaving feeling guilty instead of excited. You should be excited, baby girl. You're starting your life. Finally starting your life. And I'm proud of you. Prouder than I've been of anything else you've ever done. Because you chose yourself. And that's the hardest choice there is. I hugged him, this man who'd worked himself to the bone to provide for us, who'd survived kidnapping and loss and disappointment, who was now giving me permission to leave. I love you, Daddy. I love you too. Now go to Boston and build something beautiful. Something that's just yours and don't look back. We'll be here figuring out our own path, as we should have been doing all along. The drive to Boston took 9 hours. My car was packed with everything I owned, which wasn't much. I'd sold or donated most of my furniture, starting fresh. Devin had offered to come with me, but I'd said no. This was something I needed to do alone, a solo journey into a solo life. I arrived at my new apartment as the sun was setting. Studio, fifth floor walk up, exposed brick and questionable plumbing, but affordable and mine. All mine. I stood in the center of the empty space, surrounded by boxes, and felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Not the desperate hope of crisis management, not the fragile hope that everything might somehow work out, but real, solid hope for the future. My future. A future I would build deliberately instead of inheriting by obligation. I texted my family group chat. Made it to Boston. Apartment is small, but good. I love you all. 3 responses came quickly. My mother, so proud of you, baby. Make a beautiful life. My father, be safe, be happy, call when you're settled. Kofi, you did it, Z. You really did it. We're okay here. Stop worrying about us. Stop worrying about them. As if it were that simple, as if 32 years of being the responsible one could be switched off like a light. But maybe that was the work now. Learning to let go, learning to trust that they'd survive without me, that they'd find their own solutions, that I wasn't the only thing holding them together. I unpacked one box before exhaustion hit, just enough to make a makeshift bed on the floor with blankets and pillows. I lay down in the dark, listening to unfamiliar sounds, sirens and voices, and the hum of a city I didn't know yet. Strange and unsettling and absolutely terrifying, and absolutely perfectly right. My phone buzzed. Devin. How's the new place? Empty, intimidating, perfect. Want company this weekend? I can take the train up. Help you unpack, show you around a bit. I'd like that. Good, get some sleep. Tomorrow you start becoming whoever you're going to be next. Whoever I was going to be next. What a concept. What a gift. The girl who'd spent her whole life being what others needed could finally figure out who she wanted to be. Scary and liberating and long overdue. I fell asleep in my empty apartment, in my new city, at the beginning of my new life. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I dreamed not of crisis or obligation or family disaster, but of possibility, of all the doors that had just opened, waiting for me to choose which ones to walk through. I chose myself, finally, fully chose myself. And the world didn't end. My family didn't collapse. The sky didn't fall. They figured it out. I figured it out. We all figured it out, separately but together, free but connected, exactly as it should have been all along. I really hope you like the story, so please let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for being here. See you tomorrow. All my love.